Good evening, everybody. Can I welcome you to the second Overview and Scrutiny Committee of this municipal year. I'm not going to go through the list of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. I hope your phones are turned off. If you want to speak, please raise your hands. If you're coming in from Teams, press your button and somebody will tell me you wanted to ask a question. Can I move on to the agenda and ask for apologies, Matthew?
I received no apologies, Chair, but there are 3 members attending via Microsoft Teams.
Thank you. Can we move on to the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of July? That was the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Minutes of meeting on the Wednesday, 27th of July, which was the Overview and Scrutiny Performance Panel. And minutes of the meeting on the 23rd of September, again, the Performance Panel. Are those a true record of those 3 meetings, please?
Can I move those, Chair, please?
For a seconder? Thank you. Any comments to make about those minutes? If not, we'll move on to item 4, which is declaration of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. No? Okay. Move on to item 5, public questions. Are there any public questions for anybody?
There's no public questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to item 6, scrutiny of the Executive Cabinet minutes. Those are held on, I can find them, I can see them. Yeah, yeah. Right, minutes of the Cabinet on July the 14th. Are those a true record? Has anybody got any comments to make about the minutes in July? Or any comments to make? Yes, Ken.
Is there any progress update on where they're up to with the work at Brinskull swimming baths at the pool? The timescales, because I don't think when it was discussed at the Cabinet, they weren't aware. I think it was more the concept of the work that will be done.
Yeah, I think when we saw Angela on Monday evening, we mentioned Brinskull Bath. Said it is imminent. It hasn't started yet. Whether it's going to be started before Christmas, I don't think she knew, but it's in hand with the contractors. I think one Cabinet meeting due to the death of Queen Elizabeth that was cancelled, and the Executive Cabinet member approved those 3 items on the Cabinet for early September. If there's no further comments about the Cabinet meetings, can we move on to the next item, which is the notice of executive decisions over the next few months? There again, this is something I always bring up and I won't say moan about, but there are lots of decisions to be made, and if any members have got any concerns about any of the decisions to be made over the next few weeks, please let me know, and we might well look at them or have a meeting about them, really. There's a lot there. I think Nina sent a list out of the decisions for October, which are being decided in the next 3 weeks. If you've had a chance to read those, I think those came out early this week. Again, I'm in your hands there with the decisions pending over the next few weeks. If not, we'll move on to the next item, which we have brought forward, the next item, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Task Group Select Move Final Report. And I think, Jim, you're going to tell us something about this very comprehensive report, covers all the ground, so we'll look forward to hearing from you, and then members can ask questions.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Chair. The final report has come eventually. It seems a long time since we started the task group off, but a lot's happened in that time. I'd like to thank all members who were on that task group for the work they put in, and also especially to Sarah, who had to stand in for me at last minute with things that were happening at home at the time. So, and so I dropped her in it really at the last minute on a couple of occasions, but she did a sterling job. But the report's here before you. We had some concerns. Those concerns, when we talked to people, seemed to be very well-founded in what we did. We talked to various people. We talked to colleagues in South Ribble and in Preston who were actually having similar kinds of issues that we'd highlighted, which was something we eventually managed to get a questionnaire out to our residents, and that actually backed up what we'd been thinking, our thinking and during it. And we've got, well, I'm not going to go through all the recommendations because I'm sure you've read the report. It says it. It's a very good report in the end. Thanks, Matthew, for your patience when I kept saying, could you change this for me and could you put that in? It was much appreciated. But in the end, I think we've got a fair representation of what we discussed, what we found out, what we think where we should go next, what things we should be doing.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, I knew you would have, John.
The survey you did you have to amend the recommendations, or did you get the survey before you did your recommendations?
We did everything. The recommendations were the final thing we did.
Right.
Yeah. But the survey actually highlighted some of the issues that we'd brought up as councillors, and a lot of the concerns were the same as we'd brought up, residents brought up, the MP brought up with his casework that he'd had. So, I mean, I know some people say it was only a small number, but it was representative in the fact that it was highlighting the issues that we thought we said were there. So, yeah.
Just one more question before
Yeah,
I
that's
open this
fine.
up again. There's a report on further on from 2018 on Select Move.
Yeah.
And there were about 15 recommendations then. Is the reason why we're doing this task group because the recommendations on the previous task group hadn't been followed through by the Cabinet or officers?
I don't know, but we decided, we looked at it and thought that some of those things hadn't happened, or if they had happened, they'd lapsed again. I think that might have been the thing, that things were initiated and done, but they seemed to have lapsed. You know, and it was firming that up, but adding other recommendations as well in it, so.
Before we did it, you were very concerned that things weren't going well in
Yeah.
Select Move. I just wondered if, as you say, things had then lapsed from the recommendations in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I think from what I remember it, because I was on that task group as well, and then I was on ONS afterwards, and when we had our report back meetings, everything seemed to be going okay. And after the final, because there's 3, isn't there? We have 3 kind of follow-up reports to say how things are going, and everything seems to. But then we were getting more and more issues with Select Move that were coming through to us, especially, well, in our ward they were, I know on Kimball's, sorry, and other people were experiencing. So that's why we thought we need to go back and look at this, because some of the things that we'd recommended didn't seem to be happening anymore. Or things had changed as well, so that was why.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, so I'll leave it up to Kim.
I think it's a very good report. It's a testament to everybody that was involved in it, and the officers and everything, and the chair. But I think it's important to note that the previous task group was actually 2014.
14.
And I think that whilst it's not, I don't think it's really like at the behest of the council or the officers as having not followed up on the things. I think it's because we don't have like massive control. You know, we've kind of got to influence the other people in that partnership to try and come to our way of thinking. But I do think it's important that, I mean, given 2014, we're now in 2022, half of those issues were still the same, if not worse, from what came out in 2014, nearly 10 years ago. And I do think it's important that as overview and scrutiny, that, I mean, I know we'll have monitoring reports and stuff, but that we keep the pressure and the momentum going on it, because there are thousands of people across the borough that are interacting with this system every day and every week, and people waiting for houses, and you know, some getting positive and negative outcomes and all that. But if we don't keep the momentum up, it'll just drop off the radar again. Won't it? Yeah.
I think
yes, yes.
I think the 2018 report was the final monitoring report. If
Right,
you-
yeah.
Yeah.
But from that, you found that things weren't going particularly well. Therefore, that's why you wanted to have a new task group.
Thank you, Chair. This has been really good and very helpful for me. I've certainly got a lot of issues with Select Move with residents within my ward of Clayton, East, Brindle and Horton. Would we plan on doing another questionnaire in, say, 6 months' time to see if any issues raised have been addressed? Chair?
That could be, yeah, either 6 months, 12 months, yeah, but I think that would be a very good idea, and we could add that to this report if necessary as another little recommendation in there, you know, and hopefully get a few more responses. But yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just echoing a lot of what Councillor Molyneux has said. It is a very good report which reflects what members wanted out of the discussions we had with the MP, with officers, with councillors in South Ribble and Preston, and of course with residents. And those recommendations will hopefully make a demonstrable difference. As Councillor Marinell said, residents in Chorley East also have very serious difficulties with Select Move. And one of the recommendations we built in was to have an annual review of the service handed out to all users of Select Move. I think if any one of us, if 10 residents came to us with the same issue, we'd act on it. If 100 residents came to us on the same issue, it would be our absolute priority. The fact that well over 100 people answered this and the comments were quite, indicted the service shows the whole point of having that task group in the first place. So that report, I'm really pleased to see it. As I say, it's a testament to all of the members of that committee who all contributed something to it. So I think we should stand by that report. Thank you, Chair.
Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just echoing, just thank you to everybody who was involved in the group. I really enjoyed being vice chair of this committee, and I want to thank June for letting me shadow work, because I've learned quite a lot from.
You're invaluable to me.
Anyway, the system's not currently fit for purpose, and I think this report reflects that change is needed.
Well, Chair, I was going to make that comment myself. Actually, it came out from the resident survey, came out from discussions with councillors, and it came out in our discussion with the MP. The question was, is Select Move fit for purpose? And sadly, the answer was, it doesn't seem to be. So we need to look at that, and that recommendation is in there because it really does need addressing, I think.
Thank you for that. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the survey, a response of 4.2% isn't fantastic, and I just wondered if we could work out a way of perhaps trying to encourage more responses and get a much wider view, you know, dock and drop or something like that, with not knowing how it was actually done in the first place.
It was a struggle getting the survey. I thought, because I rang Matthew at one point, thought the survey was going ahead, and it hadn't been done. So it was done in a bit of a rush in the end, for whatever reasons, because then they said there was not money there and different things. But we said we were doing that survey, we needed it, and yes, it was small, which was unfortunate. But it actually, even though it was small, over 50% of people were dissatisfied with the service. That tells me something, no matter what's that. And I think that would have been just the same, have more people answered it, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Jennifer a question, please? Sorry, Alan.
That's Councillor Molyneux, I do appreciate that, but by the same token, most people who have a gripe tend to respond. So I'm not sure that
Some people who responded didn't have a gripe. They were quite satisfied with the service, but they were in the minority. So you can't say that they didn't. Some said it was very good, but we didn't seem to have any middle ground. It was just either all singing, all dancing, or it was the worst thing since, whatever.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't want to get off the track, Councillor Molly. No, what I was asking is there any way we can look at in the future to try and improve the response rate?
I would
like
hope so, and I would perhaps give some people a longer response time, because we seem to do it in a hurry, and perhaps that will come up if it's done again in 6 months' time, because I think it's important that we...
Right, Jennifer, can I just ask you what your thoughts on the recommendations, and do you think you'll be able to get them into practice, and hope when we come back to the review in 6 months' time, a year's time, all these have been taken care of and everything's going smoothly?
I wish I'd be able to say yes to that. So I'd hope so. We are part of a partnership, so all the work that we do is influencing that partnership. There is a lot of changes to the partnership at the moment. We're reviewing the policies, the allocation policy, in line, I hope, with the recommendations for scrutiny. We are doing a lot. We're updating the system, so it should be better accessible. We've appointed a coordinator who is going to make sure that the registered providers keep to what they're promising, and we're going to be monitoring. We're going to be monitoring figures, migration figures and others for members, and we're going to hold the sessions. But there's other things that we have influence over that we'll try and influence. But all I can say is I hope we will be able to. But we'll provide monitoring reports, and the ones that we can deliver, we will do.
Thank you for that. Can I just say, now we've got shared services, are these recommendations incorporated into South Ribble's area?
Right, so we did have representatives from South Ribble who came to the committee who had very similar shared views about lack of housing on the register, and about the ability of the select move process to work properly on digital devices. So there was very similar concerns, and also about the allocations policy. So I think, I don't think we're in an uphill battle with South Ribble, to be honest. I have regular meetings with the member for that area, and what I will be doing once this has been agreed is passing the report through to him to have a look at, because obviously the allocations policy will be coming to both cabinets in Chorley and South Ribble to finally agree to that. So I will be sharing the results of this review.
We spoke to Preston as well as South Ribble, because the three of us actually do select move, use it, and we spoke to councillors and officers from both other authorities, and as I said earlier, their findings were very similar to ours with the problems that they were having and the issues.
Okay, any further questions? No? Well, can I thank you for your comprehensive report. I think it's excellent, been well done. Thanks to Sarah to helping you, the chair of the meetings, whatever, and also the committee officers and Matthew who compiled the report, because I think it is an excellent job. And I just hope when it goes to cabinets, which I assume will be the next cabinet meeting, that they eventually, when they do make the decision, do support the recommendations. Okay. Thank you very much. So, June, I know you've got another meeting to go to, so thank you again, and you may go to your other meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Now, the next item is the written report we got from Councillor Hilton, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. He's got COVID, and I understand he's not very well with the infection. So you have the written report in front of you. It's a long report, but basically the gist of it is that there's going to be two hospitals, presumably, or two hospitals are going to be built, one in Preston, one in Lancaster, and that's basically the gist of the report. It's like all things, isn't it? I don't think we know how soon they will be built or when they can be started or anything really. It'll have to go before planning committees of Preston and Lancaster, and knowing sometimes planning decisions do take a long time, it could be 5 or 6 years before it started, but it is something that it is moving forward, and we just hopefully hope that we do get a Preston hospital, a new Preston hospital and a new Lancaster hospital. Has anybody got any queries on that? Yes.
I attended that meeting as a member of the public, and it all sounded extremely positive and encouraging, but there was no mention of whether there was actually the money to fund 2 hospitals. And also, they said about the state-of-the-art facilities would attract new staff, which obviously it would, but there was no mention of where they're getting the new staff from, because, you know, are they going to train the staff, or... So I'm a bit concerned about that aspect of it. They don't seem to be following through with...
That's right. Well, I mean, basically, once they do know they got the funding for it and they can build and they get planning permission in the areas they want to build, then presumably they'll start looking at staff and stuff. It'll take about 5 or 6 years to build. I mean, the one in Liverpool has been going for, I think, 6 years, hasn't it? And it stopped halfway because one of the companies went bust. So it's a long process. And I'm certain by the time they are built, there will be enough staff to get the hospital up and running.
I certainly hope
One of
so.
my daughters works at Lancaster at the moment in the physiotherapy department. So when next time I say, I'll be telling you about the new hospital that was going to be built up there. So yes, we hope it'll go through.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'd really like to thank Councillor Hilton for that comprehensive report, and just draw members' attention to the reverse side, to the second to last paragraph. There's no plans to close Chorley Hospital, I think is really quite an encouraging step, considering at the start of this process there are actually considerations to sort of cannibalise Chorley Hospital to help with these new super hospitals. I think it's clear that the partnership's realised as demand has ballooned, it doesn't mean you can cut services to create something more efficient. You actually need to supplement the struggling services with something new. It's quite a personal issue for me because my mum's on the front line as a nurse practitioner in A&E at Chorley, so it would have a direct impact on us if that service was closed. Of course, the staffing issue is going to crop up. It's for the first time in 106 years, first time in history, nurses are now facing ballot action because of the conditions in the NHS. I can imagine what the outcome of that will be. I think we need to support nurses across Chorley, support nurses across Lancashire. But as I've said, I'd like to thank Councillor Hilton for the report. Very comprehensive, and we're clearly making some progress. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Robert.
Yeah. Yeah, my only concern, Chair, is that, I'm looking back to the 1980s when I was working in London, and Croydon had a new hospital built there, all singing, all dancing. But when the hospital was finally completed, it didn't open for 4 years because the capital spending was there, but the revenue wasn't. And I take the point that we need the nurses, we need the revenue spent on that to get these 2 hospitals. I mean, that was just 1 hospital, now we're talking about 2. And I'm a bit worried about it's coming to fruition very soon.
Yeah, I can also say that Liverpool has opened their new hospital this last fortnight. I think there were quite a few, North had a few evenings looking how they were doing it. So presumably they must have got enough staff, either transferring from the old hospital to the new hospital, plus extra staff. So it must be working there. So hopefully if it works there, we can get it working in Preston and Lancaster.
Chair, but I believe that they're only taking out patients at the moment at the new hospital, aren't they? So it's how soon they get up and running.
It'll take time, but it looks as they're on the move anyway, it would appear. Yes, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Councillor Nevitt has just said, that we do need to stand with our colleagues. Some of them will be colleagues that will be on the picket lines. Again, I'd like to thank Alex, Councillor Hilton, for this report. But I'd like us as a committee to send our well wishes to Alex, who is suffering at the moment with COVID. But my other question is that, are we not going to be in danger of having serious staffing issues with those staff that are remaining in the hospitals that we have? Because we're hemorrhaging staff now within the NHS. They can't guarantee that they are going to be able to staff the new hospitals because they can't staff the NHS now.
Well, that's up to the directors and senior staff at both Preston and Lancaster to sort that out. I'm certainly not going to open the new hospital, which will cost 200 million or something like that, not have enough staff. So I'm certain between now and the time that the two hospitals are built, they will have sorted that out. One hopes so anyway. Comments? Okay, I'll speak to Councillor Hilton and wish him well and thank you for the report. Yeah, thank you. Okay, can we move on to item, where are we? Sustainable Public Transport Third Monitoring Report. Is that you, Zoe? Oh, where is she? No, she isn't. Oh,
Number 9.
sorry.
I'm here, Chair.
Sorry, long-term empty properties. That's been withdrawn, hasn't it, Matthew?
It has, yes. It will appear at the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee in January.
I was going to ask Chair, why has it been withdrawn? Is it the report isn't ready, or we had other stuff on the agenda?
Matthew, can you explain why it's been withdrawn?
The report wasn't quite finished at the time, and it was felt that it was only signed off late yesterday, and there was a couple of issues with the report. And we felt that, as it was requested by the committee to look at the empty properties, that bring it to January and have enough time to actually look over the report and scrutinise effectively, rather than bringing the report with less time.
I do feel, Matthew, that, you know, the people know when the scrutiny committees are, and I'm certain you'll give them 2 or 3 weeks' notice that item, whatever agenda items coming up, that they should have time to complete the report by that set time. I'm not blaming you, but I will speak to people concerned to make sure. This isn't the first time that a report has been withdrawn the day before the scrutiny meeting, and it's a shame to get some, you know, the full committee here and items are taken off the agenda. But it's not your fault, Matthew. I will take it up with the hierarchy. Okay. Yes, Kim.
So I agree with Councillor Riggett. I spoke to the cabinet member this time last week, and he told me the report was coming and detailed some of the issues that I'd raised. And I think it's very disappointing because on this issue, putting it bluntly, it's a constant fob off. I mean, I've been on ward walks looking at derelict empty properties in our part of the borough months ago, still not had any response, and it's not good. But they know my views anyway.
Well, true, yes. I mean, I will bring all this up when I speak to higher up. Yeah. Okay. Right, can we move on to the next item? Sorry about that, but move on to item 10, the Public Transport Third Monitoring Report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So, just talk you through this report, the final report of the Overview and Scrutiny Task Group for Sustainable Public Transport. And immediately I must apologise to you all because there's an error on recommendation 3. That should say 10 and 17, so I apologise for that. Clearly my omission there. Just going through the report. So it just touches on the recommendations, which I won't go through in detail, but in paragraph 8 there, it lists what those objectives were of the original task group. Seems a while now ago since those objectives were first set down. And then the report just outlines how we're doing with those recommendations. So the 21 recommendations, or 25 including subcategories, which were made by the task group, were presented in Cabinet in June 21 and endorsed. And that is the package of work that we've been working on as officers. For recommendation 20, it was agreed that the package of work relating to cycling would be developed as part of a standalone cycling project. and progress for that work would be reported back to the Climate Change Working Group. And the first update of that was given verbally on the 26th of July, and I will be taking a report to the Climate Change Working Group at the end of November. Now, if this committee wanted to see that report, then I'm sure, Chair, we could arrange for that. So I've not reported on that work in this paper, but I'm more than happy to provide updates as and when going forward on the cycling. So the table below provides information about all of the recommendations. 18 are complete or closed, 5 are in progress, and you will see there's a number that will continue as business as usual of my team. And so it's difficult because we can't close them off because they are ongoing pieces of work. Some of them, a number of them are intrinsically linked to the local plan, and as part of the local plan, planning for future infrastructure, so that they will sort of, you know, take some time to come to fruition. So things like railway stations, new roads, new cycling provision, etc. That is all going to come in due course as part of the local plan. A very interesting one, recommendation 1, related to the provision of bus services. And in the previous monitoring report, details were provided of proposals that the Lancashire County Council had to introduce a bus improvement plan in Lancashire. This new enhanced partnership scheme, which is called, intends to deliver a number of key objectives, including lower fares, which is something that the task group wanted to see, including simplified ticketing, a customer charter, and following consultation, it's actually been put in place on the 1st of April of this year, and has a governance structure, an executive board, a management board, and a forum of stakeholders. The scheme sets out the objectives of the partnership, and I wanted to append the report, Chair, but it was a huge document. So there is a link in paragraph 16. There's a link to that document, and for members particularly interested in buses, I would encourage you to read it, because it is quite an ambitious programme, and if the County Council can deliver on that, I think it would be excellent for getting more people back on buses. And you know, through COVID, we've seen that kind of fall away, and in order to achieve the outcomes, particularly around climate change, and get more people on buses, I think that scheme will hopefully deliver on that. So it sets out there in terms of in detail the objective around fares. I won't read it at paragraph 13, but it seemed to me that it was meeting that objective of the original task group in terms of, you know, trying to simplify across all of those providers a more easier way of customers to move from bus to bus if there's a different provider for different routes. In terms of ticketing and communication, the enhanced partnership scheme does commit to lower fares and simplified ticketing, and there's a number of key objectives that are identified. So paragraph 15, I won't read them all out, but those are documented, set out objectives that the partnership commits to delivering on. So I would imagine that through the monitoring, those will have to be clearly monitored and reported on in terms of how they get on with those. I would imagine that their providers will sign up to these objectives, so hopefully they'll be kept to task on that, and we'll have to deliver on it. But it is quite early doors in terms of reporting in this report as to how that progress has been undertaken so far. Recommendation 3 was for spatial planning to invite the County Council to participate in a member learning session in Lancashire Highways and Transport Master Plan proposals. Those proposals are still at a very early stage. They've commissioned, County Council have commissioned Jacobs to undertake that piece of work, but it is at quite an early stage. However, we have managed to secure agreement for them to come along on the 14th of November. And I think it would be really useful, even though they haven't got a draft master plan currently. I think it'll still be an important session for us, for members, to hear from County Council planners how that piece of work is undertaken and what the modelling is that they use, and how that then is used to identify their future investment programme for transport. So I would encourage members to attend that session. And then thereafter is the table of recommendations, and Chair, I wasn't intending on reading all of these out. If members have a particular question about a recommendation, I'm more than happy to answer those, but hopefully that sets out a good position statement in terms of where we're up to. And in terms of reporting on business as usual, like I said, because a lot of that is linked to the local plan and the work of my team, that is monitored routinely through either the Joint Advisory Committee or the local plan working group. But happy to take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. An excellent report. But as overview and scrutiny, I do think that we need a report in relation to the cycling project. So if you can give a brief overview now, Chair, if there's time, I'd appreciate that, or send the report on when it's done.
Yeah, I would prefer to send a report on. I would struggle off the top of my head to remember where we're up to with all of those actions, because I think there was 5 or 6 actions which have all been delegated across members of my team, and they're all on with those. So things like cycle storage, e-charging for bikes. We are doing a cycling survey, and that I understand is going out next week on Citizen Space, so members will receive an email on with a link to that survey. But because a lot of that work is still sort of just beginning or just in the early stages of it, I would rather bring a report back at a future meeting to you know, enable that work to really be getting underway. That makes sense. Okay.
Yes. Eddie?
I was going to ask, same as on item 21, I noticed it says the report will go to the Climate Change Working Group, so maybe after it's been there, can we just have it added to the agenda? Yeah, but I have another question on item 21. It says generic bike shelters now in place for council employees. I just wondered whether we had any either hard data or soft data on whether they're actually being used.
It's not a good news. Should I respond, Chair? Is that okay? It's not a good news story, unfortunately, for those. And it's funny because Sally and I in my team have had a conversation just yesterday about it. There's 4 shelters. There's 4. I mean, I haven't seen them physically. Actually, I've seen a picture of them. I've not actually gone over there myself. But they are kind of really good containers with the user has to take a padlock, but they're covered, so they're not like just a metal hoop. And staff wanted them, but I'm advised by colleagues at Bengal Street that nobody's used them. I'm not really sure why that is. So there is some exploratory work to be done, I think, in terms of staff understanding. Because it may, off the top of my head, I would suspect it's because only a small number of staff work at Bengal Street. The majority of staff are either Union Street or Town Hall. And it might seem a bit daunting to go over to the depot with the barriers, etc., and people that they don't normally work with to leave their bikes there. So I think there's a bit of an education piece to do with the staff around understanding, you know, where those are, you know, the logistics of it. You know, people can be given passes to Bengal Street. There's showers in that building. So I think it's just about a bit of promotion. It may also be because we've moved towards hybrid working that a lot of staff are working from home more than they have in the past, and it may be that they come in when they've got meetings, so they're, you know, suited and booted, and they think, well, I can't ride my bike to work because I have to get changed. But I think there is a bit of work to do there to encourage staff to be using the bikes more and to, you know, use that excellent infrastructure, because if we're not using it there, one of the things that Sally said to me is, should we, you know, just a question, should we move it somewhere else for the town centre, for people in the town centre to be using, because they did cost, you know, a bit of money. But I said, well, really, at this early stage, I'd want to do a bit more work for staff first before we make that decision.
Thank you, that's really helpful, and I appreciate the honesty on that. It would have been easy not to be. So maybe I wonder if you could update us at some point on how that progresses. And my other question was on item 16, attracting a community car share club to the borough. It says, not started yet, delayed due to COVID and regulations. Are we now able to start that work, and do we intend to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I did ask the shared service lead for transformation, and it was due to COVID the reason why this hadn't been looked at. Vicky wasn't sure whether it's something that we would do internally or whether we would rely on our partners to kind of help deliver it and to scope it. So it does need a bit of thinking in terms of how they're going to take that piece of work forward. But if it's something that members remain committed to and want us to drive that forward, then I can certainly feed that back to that team to make sure that they take it forward, that this isn't kind of, well, you know, we've had COVID and that we're not going to no longer explore that. I did ask the question, and they said, well, if it's something that members still want us to pursue, then more than happy to do that.
Well, I wasn't part of the task group that made all the recommendations, so I bow to other people's views on that, but I suppose I would reflect the fact we just had a conversation about we spent money doing something that people said and they didn't use. So I would suggest if we do go down this road, we do some solid groundwork first to see whether it's worth the time and the investment, and then come to a decision.
Just on recommendation 1, 7, 15 and 18, I'll do number 1 first. About the enhanced partnership that you've touched on and the fair implications and stuff, and that basically it would be better. I just want, I mean, I know it's complete and continuous business as usual, but I just wondered, is the council going to monitor the impact of the enhanced partnership around fairs? Because I mean, I've asked the question of the county council and they can't tell me. Anecdotally, what residents tell us in Adlington is that we're already seeing fare increases. We saw fare increases because of Andy Burnham's silly clean air zone proposals. So Stagecoach put their fares up thinking that they were going to be sort of screwed for 20 grand a year or whatever it was. And now, because Greater Manchester is going down the route of franchising and we're not, that those buses that cross the border are now putting the prices up when they come into Lancashire. And I just think that could be a poor implication of something that can be good for Chorley. I just wondered whether or not we're going to monitor that. My second point on 7 was, again, just whether or not you've had any feedback from Greater Manchester in terms of the cross-border routes, because it just says that a letter was sent to them. And again, I think that conversation between both, I mean, I know when we had the task group, they were only really interested in speaking to Lancashire County Council. I don't think they would actually engage with Chorley Council, which is disappointing. But I do think that following up on that would be good, because it's not just the Adlington border, it's the Coppell border. And, you know, if they're not engaging with us, it's a shame. And then my third point, number 15, was it 15? Yeah, I think it said it was complete, but it said that the county council would be up for doing a member learning session on public transport planning, but there was no follow-up intimated on that. I just wonder whether or not that's something that we can push forward with, because again, I think from councillors, when we have all these sporadic planning applications in our wards, there's never any, certainly I can't quite grasp when, where, how, why the county council don't ask for public transport contributions. I think a lot of it is because it's piecemeal development and we don't necessarily have the big applications, but I think it would be interesting to learn about how they come to those conclusions when they're planning public transport, if that's what it's intimating at. And then the last one, sorry. Oh, right. Yeah.
So if you just go back to the first one, was it number 1? I might need you to repeat some of the questions.
Yeah, it was just you were talking at the beginning about
the enhanced partnership. Yeah, I mean, that's not something that my team would routinely do, and I would put it back to this committee as to whether that's something you want to consider as a future piece of work that is done, because usually we wouldn't do that, and we're a very small team and that wouldn't be a priority for us and we wouldn't necessarily be able to influence that. But obviously, like I said, they are publishing, you know, there's a governance structure that's online, and I would imagine, I've not checked in terms of monitoring reports, I would imagine there's monitoring reports there. So if this task group committee was wanting a piece of work to be done to maybe do one, update on how that's going, then we would do that as officers if that was requested. But we wouldn't routinely do that as a team.
I think it was just because it says continue business as usual. I'm not being funny, but Chorley Council to proactively lobby and engage with the county council to encourage a greater role. When you're having those conversations, presumably regularly, can you be asking those questions? Because if more people, I'm not saying like it's your responsibility to go away and do it and produce a piece of work on it, but when you're talking to the county council, asking those questions to say, well, how's it going with, with the, and are bus fares decreasing, and what they, because I would have thought that they'd have done some analysis on it in terms of showing the benefits or disbenefits of it.
I mean, we can certainly take that on board and be thinking about that. I suppose there's two different. I suppose it's on a spectrum, isn't it, as to whether being alive to the implementation of that EP scheme and looking at it, or really scrutinising it, looking at their monitoring reports, looking back at the objectives, because that's quite a big piece of work, isn't it, I think. So I suppose it's just on what part of that spectrum we're looking at. If we're being asked as a team to take that on board and be thinking about that when we discuss it with them, absolutely. I mean, there is a workshop. It's in one of the recommendations to have an action role, to have a workshop with bus providers as part of the local plan. That now will probably be early in the new year, but we're really keen to do that because it's absolutely crucial that as part of the local plan and planning for future for growth, for new houses and new employment, that the bus providers have a say, influence that in terms of any impact on existing routes or any new routes, to make sure that they're viable and that the bus providers are aware of that and are supportive of it. Because the last thing you want to do is to have growth in a particular area where the bus providers aren't committed, or will say, well, actually, there's no way, you're going to need X and Y to fund or to deliver on that. So as part of that workshop, we could be asking as well the providers what they think about that scheme. So that is something that we would routinely do to get their feedback. So that again will help us to get an understanding of how that scheme is and whether it actually delivers on all those promises. Because they are, it is interesting, and if they can do that, then it should be excellent for the customer. But it's whether they deliver on it or not.
It's just having it at the back of your mind.
It
when
is,
speaking
yeah,
to
of
people.
course. It is, yeah. So your next question, sorry.
Sorry, 7. Item 7, recommendation 7.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the places for everyone, we had a meeting with them and we raised concerns about the cross-border impacts and franchising, and it was in true local plan style. It was noted they are coming up to examination stage on that plan. I think, again, it's just down to whether we would want to further pursue those discussions or not in terms of an impact, and look at the impact of that as and when, it's difficult this, because in terms of feedback from people that are using those services, again, that feedback generally would be a county responsibility as opposed to the district council. So it's difficult for us and for me as a team, because it's not some information that we would normally collect. We would have an understanding about where we're planning, where there's development happening in Chorley, or we're looking at planning development in Chorley and it's near the border of Greater Manchester or Wigan or wherever it might be. And we will raise those concerns or issues in those duty to cooperate discussions. But what they don't tend to get down to is a level of detail around ticketing and fares and costs, because that would be more of a county responsibility.
I think I remember, because I chaired the task group, and I remember Chris Sinnott sat here and actually said that he was really worried about the implications that this new integrated ticketing scheme could put upon Chorley, because if people can jump on buses and trains and they can, a lot cheaper, then suddenly you get a lot more people going to Middlebrook, a lot more people going to Bolton, Greater Manchester, and then there's less of a economic drive for people to come to Chorley. Yeah. So to me, I think that's a massive follow-up to keep engaging with Greater Manchester about how we can work closer with them, because, I know I used to work in Greater Manchester before I could drive, and I used to get a bus pass for like 20 quid a week. And you can't get anything like that that could take you on any train, any tram, any bus. You can't get anything like that round here. So
I think the county have got a key role as well, because any learning they could feed into that enhanced partnership. So it's possibly a discussion for myself to have with Andrew Varley of the county as to how we can take that forward in terms of that kind of partnership working, because they are the drivers of it. We can have an interest in it and we can report back and we can try and influence it, but in terms of responsibilities and real kind of teeth, that is the county council. So I do take that on board, and I will think about how we can do that. Yeah, definitely. Okay, the next one was
15.
Yeah, that is that session. I mean, there's obviously the session's only an hour, and transport is a huge area. But the way I've geared it towards the county council was two things. Obviously, planning public transport and how they do that, but then obviously linked to the local plan and future plans for public sector transport, in particular funding of new schemes. So there's an aspiration, for example, for the train station, and obviously the county would have a big say in if that was to come forward in the future. So that session should tick that box. Now, if you want me to really clarify with the county council the scope, I'm more than happy to do that for that session to make sure it does address particular issues. So I will go back and say that you're really particularly interested in that, and just make sure it's not too broad or too kind of technical, should we say, in terms of planning.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. The last one was number 18. I was just a bit disappointed that it's closed, because I know the council will work with all transport providers around accessibility, because we've still not got anywhere with our with Chorley train station, main train station, and the accessibility issues. And I know there was a big article from our MP and a grant and stuff that was coming from government, but there's no... I've not seen anything happening at Chorley train station. I think if we close that, that's like our main, main thing. I mean, I know there was some stuff on social media the other week about it, people saying this was promised in 2019, and I think if my memory serves me right, I think Chorley Council and the MP put the bid in. I don't think the county council supported it at the time. And I know it was successful, because I know there was loads of stuff from the government minister and from the MP about it. But nothing's happened. I'm not sure whether or not we should, because that's our main station, isn't it? If we shut that and say we're happy with accessibility, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot.
In terms of the accessibility, I was under the impression we were successful. It is a project that was being led by Conrad. Obviously, Conrad's left. I don't know who's replaced Conrad, but he reports to Mark Lester. I can certainly ask the question for Mark as to where that piece of work is up to. And feed that back. I'm more than happy to do that.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
So my question was already raised by
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got 3 questions, but hopefully you'll be able to... They're quite straightforward. So, page 151, the recommendations there about this enhanced partnership. I think it's really good about the evening unlimited travel. It's really good about buy one, get one free offer on weekends, and also the half-price fare for under-19s. When it comes to the half-price fare for job seekers and for recipients of universal credit, I just wonder how that's going to work in practice, because I'm sure no member of this committee would want someone to have to get on a bus and prove to the driver that they're either a job seeker or on a recipient of universal credit. Is there going to be a frictionless way of doing it? I know the job seekers one says some would have access to a certain card from Job Seekers Plus. How is it going to be proven? Because the last thing we'd want from this progress is that people are humiliated on public transport, having to prove that they're in receipt of certain benefits. So I think we'd want some clarification. So that's my first question. My second question is getting into the recommendations in a similar vein to what Councillor Snape said. It's page 155, recommendation 9. I really think that needs to be brought back to the council. This task group was before my time on the council, but for members of that task group who have made these recommendations in good faith that they'll be acted upon, it does say in this report that it may be reconsidered. I think it either needs to be brought back to this committee or to the full council, because if we're not willing to progress with talks with LCC about taking over the interchange, this council needs to be aware about it, because I know that members of the Labour group on the council, for instance, would be quite dismayed by that, and perhaps a lot of members of the Conservative group as well. Second, the last question, in a similar vein, similar to what Councillor Snape said, page 159, recommendation 18, I think that also needs to be brought back to the council, because we're mixing the wood, we can't recognise the wood from the trees on this case. The fact that this enhanced partnership is going ahead does not mean that we've got access to something like an oyster scheme in Lancashire, and really that's what we need. So I think that should be reviewed as well, because we've not got that frictionless travel, that accessibility for people to use public transport in Lancashire the way that they might do in Greater Manchester. So again, in a similar vein, I think if recommendations from the initial report are not being acted upon, they should be brought back. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, if I work backwards, on the oyster scheme, the difficulty with number 18 is that's a county function. And their response when I contacted them was very clear that we will not pursue that. We are pursuing our EP scheme. So it's a difficult one for me in terms of, you know, how we take that forward. Obviously, I can make our views clear, your views clear to the County Council that it is something that Chorley Council wishes to pursue or scope to look at going forward. Whether they'll listen to me or not is, you know, whether it's more of a political approach, but they were very adamant that their EP scheme will improve the customer experience and deal with some of the issues that that you've mentioned in terms of the actual experience and different providers, etc., and ticketing. So that's a difficult one. In terms of the interchange, I think again it's one for me to feed back to Mark Lester, because this was a project that was being delivered by that directorate, and Conrad, when I prepared this report, was very clear that at that stage it wasn't being progressed. But again, if there's a political drive to do that, and that is issued to Mark Lester, then that may be something that is looked at again. And then in terms of the first one, I completely agree that people shouldn't have to provide evidence on a bus when you've got other people around you. That is, you know, it's a dignity issue. I couldn't give you the answer here, but I can certainly ask the question and feed that back. No problem.
Regarding that last one that was discussed about the job seekers, I do recall that when in the 1990s, after I had a stroke and I was actively seeking jobs again, I did enrol in Preston to go to the job seekers thing there, and they did provide a token which you presented to the bus. Now that was, you had to enrol and you went and you spent more or less all day there looking at jobs, ringing up and everything. They were helping you. So I think that applied. I think what that does is apply to that specific instance, not everybody who goes to the job centre every week to get free transport.
I'll clarify it, Chair. I can ask the question.
Any further questions? I mean, this task group was, again, a very comprehensive review 2 years ago, and it's good to see some of the objectives or recommendations have been dealt with. I think we've come up tonight with 3 or 4 of the recommendations which should be looked at in further detail for a meeting next year sometime to come back and give us an update, really. Is that something we can ask you to do, Zoe?
Absolutely, I agree, Chair. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sorry. Right.
Yeah, just a quickie, Zoe, do you think a lot of these questions that we're asking can only be decided once the core strategy, core plan's been sorted and the local plan's been sorted, of where the new housing sites are going, the businesses are going, the old site, so that the providers can only make a decision once that's come to fruition?
Absolutely. I think obviously the situation is fluid and continues to be. We've just come through COVID and the cost of living as well, and fuel that may influence people to use or not public transport, or to do more working from home. But I think the local plan will have a key role to play in terms of getting people to use public transport more, if it does what it should do, which is to make sure that those routes are in place when you've got those developments coming forward and that they are affordable. So, you know, I think it is timely that, you know, that are appropriate that a further report comes, because when I was preparing the report, it did feel like a lot of it is, it's in progress, it's in train, and I think it is something that, you know, we should keep an eye on, and certainly that enhanced partnership scheme, because I do hope it delivers on all of those objectives, but, you know, it is ambitious, so it will be an interesting one to see. So, yeah, more than happy to bring a report back in the future.
Okay. So thank you very much for this evening, coming to give us an update. I say if we can look at the points we brought out tonight and then come back next year to one of the meetings with an update, that would be great. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for being here tonight. And if you want to leave, you can leave. And we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, I think, is the programme for the next few, well, next 2 or 3 meetings, we've got, the one in January, we've got a fairly full agenda already, so Matthew informs me, including the budget scrutiny. But I'd like to start some task group, or 1 or 2 task groups before the end of this municipal year. And if anybody got any thoughts of what we might do, we can discuss it tonight. Or it is suggested that we have a quick meeting in November on Teams. I think we did this 2 years ago. We had a quick meeting, just the item being the work programme, or the task group, you know, what we're going to do. And we decided on 2 tasks in about 10 minutes. So this is what we're hoping we could do in November. Have a quick Teams meeting and come up with 2 or 3 topics. Unless you've got 2 or 3 topics tonight that we might look at. No comment. So would we be happy to come to a Teams meeting in November, then with 1 item on the agenda, some things to look at in more detail. Just coming up further to that, those that were there on Monday night at the cafe meeting or evening, you spoke with a lot of the senior officers of the council. Now it might be from that meeting with various officers you had some issues, and if you had some issues with various departments, then bring them back, then we can have a further look at. Okay? If we're happy then for the meeting in November, I'll close the meeting tonight, say thank you very much, and a safe journey home.